Hello everyone, it is Reese here and you join me again for another reaction video. And I was sent this piece to react now, and I think it's kind of it's going to be an interesting video. So it's a piece from Collider by Diego Pineda Pacheco. It's going to be how I pronounce that. I hope that's right. If you watch this, the six scariest movies released since 2000 ranked. And I suspect I've been sent this in part essentially because I'm not going to agree. Um, so yes, it'd be interesting. We'll see how. Okay, so that's where it's starting. So there's no sense of how these are being ranked. There's no sense of if it's audience scores, if it's who knows what. As if it's audience scores, if it's critics scores, if it's just list them all as masterpieces. Um, it's going to be very interesting to see what comes up with this article. So the what do we know? So the title picture, the cover image for this article is The Conjuring, which may rock up. Other things that may rock up. Um, there have been numerous scientific studies suggesting that Sinister is the scariest film ever, based on sort of physiological responses. So we may see that. Depends which way we're going. So it's sort of talking here, Conjuring, a modern international classic like Rex. So if it's bringing in international horror, we may see some of the French extremity of the 2000s, and we may see sort of J horror of the same period, and some Korean horror films and such, that has come a little later. Indie horror films as well. It's very hard to know. There is no real, no real sort of of how you sort of classify these films. And then things like the things that are sort of popularly discussed as the scariest films ever. We've seen it with Paranormal Activity. We saw it with Longlegs. We saw it with um, a whole lot of bunch of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see here. And it's going to be interesting. I think what I really want to see here is the justifications, because I'm not going to say anything is inherently wrong. What you find scary is, sort of your own prerogative. And it's going to be interesting to see because the field is left open to literally everything that's come out over the last 26 years. Um, how exactly these choices are made and justified. So let's have a look. Let's go down. So number six. So it was Rex. So which was mentioned already in the introduction. So Rex. So we're beginning with an international horror and a Spanish horror. Um, it's this Rec is sort of interesting. So this comes at the period, um, really kind of where the found footage boom was just about to take off. It says here it exploded in popularity after the Blair Witch Project, and yes, but really it was the success of Paranormal Activity that caused sort of the real 21st century contemporary sort of wave. Iraq is excellent. It is terrifying. Let's see here. What do we have? A major commercial success. One of the best opening scenes in the history of zombie cinema. One of the scariest final shots in movie history. Um, Again, I can agree with all of that. There isn't much subtext or narrative depth here. Maybe narrative depth, so sort of people are trapped in an apartment block, and it's sort of quarantined and sort of slowly succumb to the infection. I don't know, you couldn't say there's much subtext. There's quite a lot going on with sort of religion, and sort of there's been a lot of good writing on this film. So I think there is it's richer than I think this piece is giving it the credit. Um, Again, I would agree with all of the I would agree with all of the summaries here. This is a film that sort of doesn't hang around. It essentially sets out to do one job. Um, and it is tight. It is very tightly constrained. Now, I mean that in the claustrophobic sense, but also sort of there's no slack in this film. I think that's one of the reasons that it works so well. Um, it clocks in at just a little over an hour exactly. It's so taut. So I could agree with that. We continue downwards. Five Skinnamarink. So yeah. So this is where we get. So here's where I'm already wavering. Often it's the love it or hate it kind of movies that end up becoming the biggest horror classics. Um, to call it one of the scariest horror films of the past 26 years is I don't know. I'm fully on board with this. So Skinnamarink is kind of so it's an indie horror, um, and it's essentially following kids sort of around a house, right? Um, The fact that I'm barely struggling to call it to mind. Zucked has its own story of what I made of it. This is the kind of films that sort of don't really land with me. Um, it's guaranteed to only appeal to a certain group of people. At which point, I don't know, you can really make a case for it being one of the scariest films of the past 26 years. If by your own admission, it is only sort of working for certain a certain sliver of the audience. Um, I say if there's something that charms you, this sense of kind of analog horror and it's being positioned on sort of on the ground level. And I think the description here of liminal aesthetic and sound design for a unique fear factor. I would agree with that. If the film is particularly terrifying for you, brilliant. Should it make a list like this? I'm less convinced. The Conjuring. So essentially we've seen the three films here, that have been cited at the start of the article. Um, Giving three of them away in your introduction is a bit of a thing. Um, so again, it's a very different well, as it were. So this is sort of a mainstream Hollywood horror. I don't think I need to tell anyone about The Conjuring, but it's Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as the Warrens investigating a paranormal occurrence in a farmhouse, and it turns out to be a spirit of a witch. Um, and yes, again, it's very effectively made. So sort of some beautiful scenes. There are jump scares. There are sort of some of the modern trappings, really, of on horrible sequences like the hide and clap or such. The wardrobe shot as well. My goodness, that was a jump in a seat if I saw it. Um, and the film works so well in part because, unlike a lot of horror, we're given characters to care about. And I'm not just talking about the Warrens here. I'm also talking about the family. Um, who are sort of the centre of the haunting, and Lily Taylor as the mother, in particular, what they call the parents, I think. Um, Again, I can be on board with this. There's a lot of if you're sort of talking about some of the sort of scariest and longest lasting in terms of sort of contemporary mainstream horror, um, this I think is a fair shout. Let's go down. Sinister. There you are. So I told you this was. So I predicted this again. There you are. It's exactly the same reason that I gave, and that it is sort of scientifically measured as the scariest film ever. It's exactly. I swear I did not look at this list before I did it. Um, People who know me and know my writing know I'm a fan of Sinister. I'm a fan of Ethan Hawke, generally, and sort of the sound design of this film, Christopher Young, I think is some of the scariest, sort of most uncomfortable abject sound design um generally seen in sort of a mainstream film. So the film itself, have you not seen? So Hawke is a true crime writer, moves into a house where a family had been killed, and starts to investigate and discovers a sort of selection of what appear to be snuff films in the attic, which have a sort of supernatural element. I'm not going to say more. Um, there are, yeah, elements of the film that are generally not perceived that good, and sort of some sort of representations of the paranormal. I'm sort of trying not to give it away. But yeah, there's sort of brutal realism. So this fusion of the crime aesthetic, particularly in the sort of Super 8 films that he finds and watches. Um, some of those films, the Lawnmower one in particular, is the one that always gets me every single time I rewatch it. Um, a cult classic again. I can be on board with this, and I can be on board with this. I think for the reason I give and the reason that's given in this article. So this is sort of an interesting list. I'm trying to think two more. What what we've had is sort of an international horror. We've had a sort of an indie horror. We've had a mainstream horror, and we've had a sort of scientifically ranked one. Although it is also a mainstream horror as well. So what other rationales? If this was a list essentially of six sort of scariest films within representing the sort of horror. Um, that may be quite an interesting way to frame it. So, what else would you even discuss? Some sort of like auteur films, maybe, and maybe staying international. Let's continue onwards. The Babadook. Um, yeah, again. So I've not seen number one. Um, praised by some as the single greatest horror film of the 2010s. It's the Babadook Australian horror film, in which a mother, played by I think what's her name? Is it Essie Davis, the actress? Um, and she starts as this creature, the Babadook, and sort of it's a really one of the earliest in the wave of sort of elevated horror films that came um sort of from the mid 2000s up to the present moment. Read David Church's excellent book Post Horror on that if you're interested in it. So yes, so sort of this scary monster is also sort of a metaphor for the grief that the mother feels having lost her partner. The creature itself is a frightening design, though it does not crop up quite as much as the advertising may have implied. At one time, William Friedkin called it the scariest film he'd ever seen. Yeah, I don't fully know I'm on board with this. I don't know that this is a film really I would call inherently scary as much as I would kind of with all these languages of elevated horror. It's not quite fear that they generate so much as just negative emotion generally, and I think that's probably where I would place it. I'm so intrigued to see what number one is going to be. I have no idea. The way this list has gone, I have no idea. I think sort of what other themes are there? Just issues horror, and I'm saying that as a sort of a general category. There's something like Get Out or whatnot. Hereditary has come up quite a lot again. Let's discover. Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, I should have backed myself from the start, really. Um, Again, this feels to me, this is what I would call a safe pick. Again, they're calling it a largely divisive indie horror. I don't think that you can do this. You can't do this. You can't have a third of your list of such a small list where you say that half, when you say that a third of the films don't work for a chunk of the audience. That feels like you're not. This list needed better categorization. It needed better clarification. Sorry, about what how it was ranking these. Although some people dislike the film's slow burning pacing, others would confidently call it one of those horror movies without flaws. Um, yeah, I mean, again, it is a frightening film, and some of the sequences. So I recorded another video earlier today where we talk about one of the surprise deaths. Um, those ones really land. Some of the shots are glorious. There's a shot in which there's a sort of character in the corner of a room. There's a lot to the film. It is very rich, and it does stick with you. It does stick with you. And whether I'd call it the scariest film of the past 26 years, I think is very subjective. And especially reliable. But the question is sort of what are you looking for in films? And if you look at this list, the things that are missing are sort of gore horrors and slasher horrors, as it were. Which for some people that is sort of the ultimate scary thing for them. Body horrors as well. And we had a lot of I want to say issue horrors and sort of politically inflected horrors, or more explicitly politically inflected horrors, I should say. And there'd be a case as well for kind of essentially more international horror as well, given how significant it's been. I know that two of the films on this list are international ones, or say maybe non-Anglophone ones, which is only really rare here. I wanted to look down at the comments and see if there are any other suggestions, and of course there are not, because that would be the thing. I don't know I'm fully on board with the list. I think the cases are made well for some of them and perhaps not made too well for others. And I would be so intrigued to hear your thoughts about what should be here. And say that you're making this list out to 10. What else would you add in? What's missing? Or am I being an idiot? Is this list sort of essentially brilliant and completely right? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I can't quite pass it. My feelings on this are incredibly mixed. Masterpieces are all essential viewing for anyone and everyone who loves movies and that make it who loves horror films. Yeah, yeah, yeah. These are the things. Sometimes some of these collider lists I've reacted to before, and there's an interesting, essentially, the way that the lists are set up very infrequently reflects what the list actually looks like or how it's pronounced. I think this is another case, but I would say to Diego, I would say to Pacheco, this is very interesting. I don't necessarily disagree with any of your picks, but it'd be so interesting to see how you came to some of these conclusions. But anyway, yes, I'm going to stop talking. Let me, I bring it to you guys. Tell me what's what's not here, what should be here, what's missing. Am I being an idiot and getting it all wrong, or do you agree with these choices? Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when there's a new video coming. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one.